Hello and welcome back to your OnlyAccies podcast, and it's time for our season review. We'll be looking back at a few big things. We'll be choosing our player of the year, young player of the year, our underrated player. We'll get onto that though in a minute. Guys, first of all, how are you doing? Are we feeling better now that the football season's done and we can have the excitement of looking forward to a new season, or are we still feeling the effects of what was a pretty poor season for Accies?
I mean, at least we can go and enjoy our weekends without... Just was the best way of putting it, without fucking being depressed, putting it lightly. But no, I think we touched on it in the Twitter spaces. It's this time, as soon as the season's finished, isn't it really an exciting time for an Accies fan as well? So it's just about going and enjoying our weekends for a while until stuff starts appearing in the sort of Twitter gossip mill, which gets us excited and gets David's body tingling.
David, how are you feeling after the season's done?
A wee bit tingly, eh? I got to admit, I found that a really tough season to be. I'd like to think I'm an enthusiastic Accies fan at the best of times, but there was a couple of weekends I'm ashamed to say about. It was as if I wasn't even interested the game was on. You were just like, fuck, this isn't worth being thinking about. And quite a few times that's actually came to fruition. You're thinking this game's going to be murder, and it's turned out to be. It's been really, really disappointing season. I think, to put a positive spin on it, I'm hoping that this is something we're learning lessons from. I think that's said a million times, just sheer arrogance the way we head into this season. We're probably going to a wee bit more, but I think Taylor realises what a job he's got on his hands, and he needs the fans on his side and things like that. So I think things will get better. I think people are starting to agree with us, because as fans, there was plenty of fans on here before the season started last year saying we can't hope for any better than 5th or 6th, and we were naive enough to say no, with Jamie Hamilton and Lewis Smith and whoever it is will be much better, but I think people in the club realise that it really wasn't good enough. So, no, I'm glad to see the back of that one, if I'm being honest.
All right, well, as I said, we've got our awards list, so to speak, to work through. We asked for your opinions on Twitter as well, so thank you for putting them in. We will be running through a few of those as we go. So let's start, guys, with underrated. A player who maybe has went under the radar this season, and stuck out to you for whatever reason. So, Brandon, let's start with you. Your underrated player of the season.
I don't think you even need to ask me who mine would be. I think the smile sort of gave it away, but I've noticed a few people on Twitter, and I was actually took back a wee bit the fact that they've gave him theirs, but I've went on about him enough, so I think I need to give mine to David Moyo. As per with Hamilton Accies fans, we're all guilty of it. I've been guilty of it in the past with players. You always have that one player that, regardless of if he scored a double hat-trick or if he does anything good, he's not going to get very many plaudits. I think David Moyo was pretty underrated for us this season. Like we've touched on, the system didn't work with any striker, any player that we played up front himself. It's a completely useless, ineffective system that we could have had Ronaldo up top himself, and he would never have been that effective. So I thought, for the job we asked him to do, he done it sufficiently to a degree. And then when we had him up front with people and we actually gave him support, he done his job as well as he could. Especially with the criticism, a lot of people would have folded under the whole circumstances, the set up, the sort of players around him. Maybe we've been calling for a striker to sign, forward players to sign. We didn't get that, so he was up front himself for a long period of time. He got some important goals, which ultimately have helped his sort of secure championship football. And yeah, the song as well, which has been a sort of a good one of the only sort of things that have cheered me up all season. So my underrated player this season is David Moyo.
That'll certainly divide opinion. I think it's fair to say. David, underrated player of the season?
I would agree with Brandon. I'll give you a different answer just so we're not saying the same, but I agree with everything Brandon said. I mean, you've got to give the guy credit where, like you say, he's got one of the hardest jobs in football, being a striker for Hamilton Accies, the style we've been playing this season. And he has actually got a half-decent return when you look at it. What was it, 8 or 9 goals in the league?
9 goals it is in the season, so 4 assists.
If we said that at the start of the season, you probably would take that for Moyo. I don't think many people would have banked on him getting that. I think my underrated player probably doesn't actually qualify as an underrated, but I would say Steve Lawson. Now, obviously, he has got lots of praise, but I don't think he gets enough credit for the fact that he had, was it well over a full year completely out. He came in, not really, we didn't know what position he was going to be, and he's kind of shown like a brilliant attitude where you can kind of tell he's just listen, I'll play in goals if you want me to. He kind of gives that desire to play, and I think that's something that not many in the team had. Happy to be there and happy to play, and like I said on previous podcasts, his workman attitude, and like I say, to be out the game for that long, come in and actually then be a standout against guys, I think he put a lot of our team to shame. So I know that he has got a lot of plaudits for fans, but I don't think enough credit if that qualifies. Like I say, I would agree with Brandon's choice of Moyo, but I think Steve Lawson really did brilliant when he came in for us as well. And it was something that really got the fans back inside as well, because roughly at that time we were starting to lose interest. There really wasn't any desire. And it was refreshing to see somebody like Steve Lawson come in. Like I said, we're not blessed with the most technical players over the years at Hamilton, but if you come in and show a work rate, then the fans will love you. And I think that he's going to be a big player next season. He's part of the squad. He's part of the system. He'll have a pre-season under his belt. I think he'll really go up a level. So I had to say Steve Lawson for me.
Fair enough. I went with Brian Easton. And the reason I went with Brian Easton is at the start of the season, I think I said that this will be his last season. I don't see him really playing much this year. I don't see him being very effective. And I could not be more wrong. As Stephen Naylor's pointed out quite a lot on our Twitter spaces and on Twitter and that as well, we'll look a lot worse without Brian Easton in the team, especially that second half of the season when we played the 3 at the back. You know, when we have dropped to 4, we just look all over the place. We need his experience in that team. And I'm really glad. I said earlier on the season that he'll retire at the end of this year. And I'm really glad now that he's came out and put that kind of rumour to bed and said, he's out of contract, but he says he basically is staying. That was the article that came out the other day. So Brian Easton, for me, I think is underrated. He's got a lot of plaudits recently, but personally, I'd kind of written him off. And I apologise, Brian, because you've been fantastic. And I'm really glad you're playing again next year. So that's our underrated. You've got David Moyo, which, as I said, will split opinion. Positively or negatively, it's up to you. Steve Lawson and Brian Easton. A few names that were thrown in from the fans on Twitter. Colin Hamilton has said underrated. He thinks Matthew Shields. Aki's Life agrees with me and says Easton is underrated. You've got the likes of John Parson agreeing with you, Brandon. He says Moyo is an underrated player, as does Fiona. Andy Winter has been thrown up once or twice as well for underrated player. Looking at these replies now, Brandon, you might edge this. There's quite a few David Moyos in there as well. So a few players agreeing with you. We've got Ryan Fulton, another Andy Winter, Scott Martin, not really played much. And one that stood out to me was Liam, who said his underrated player was Mcdonald. And so I want to just touch on Keenan McDonald quickly, because we spoke about him at the start of the season when he signed very positively and in the team of the year. Has not really kind of kicked on to what we probably expected him to, but I've said it plenty of times during the season that I don't think that's necessarily down to him. It's more down to the system that he plays in. It doesn't really doesn't really complement how he plays as a player. So what are your guys' opinions quickly on Keenan McDonald before we move on in his season?
Well, I hope he doesn't go to Falkirk. I think we were just speaking about it there. as we said, there's already one rumour mill that's floating about since John McGlynn's went there. I just think we've spoke about the setup all season, how it clearly hasn't worked. We'll obviously touch on that a bit more as this goes on, but that the way in which we set up, it just had such a negative effect in so many players that we thought were going to thrive this season. There was countless players that we thought were going to take us to further than where we finished this season. I think playing Kieran Mcdonald at left back with two centre backs majority of this season is not really gave him an opportunity. We know he likes going forward. We know he likes driving with the ball. And the fact that he's been playing a four at the back, and let's be honest, it's been a very, very defensive four at the back. He's been having to do probably what you wouldn't even call, I'll go into a football manager, an inverted fullback is what you'd probably call him, because he has been so defensively suited, which doesn't suit him at all. When we've changed our setup, probably one of the most notable games I would say he probably played his best in was away to Arbroath. But when we've changed the setup and we've went to having the three centre backs and having McDonald as one of the wing backs, I would understand what Liam says, because he has played at that level where we knew he could, and that's the reason why he ultimately got left back of the season last year, because he was playing in a fairly attacking minded sort of flary football Rafe side. So unfortunately he's not got to the heights we expected of him, but I don't think it's necessarily down to him, and hopefully now that Taylor's realised, or he says that he realised that setup doesn't work, we go into next season with a different mindset and we play a better style of football from the off, and we do have Kieran McDonald in our team. Definitely.
Moving on to our next award, I suppose, flop of the season. Somebody you maybe expected a lot of and it didn't kick on. So maybe Kieran McDonald could be in that category for a few people as well. But flop, I've said Lewis Smith for my flop, and I'm really, really disappointed because at the start of the season, me and David were, I think David said it earlier on, very naive. And I expected Lewis Smith to come in here and absolutely tear the championship up. I really, really did. Him and Jamie Hamilton, I really thought they would do well. But it's just not worked out. I don't know if confidence is a big problem. He seems to really lack it in the last two games where he started. Obviously, the system doesn't help as well. But he's also not been playing at all this season. He's barely featured. I know he had an injury problem, but he's barely featured. And I just feel like he had so much expectation on his shoulders for this year, and I just feel like he's not lived up to it. And it's disappointing to say because I really like Lewis Smith, but I have to give him, in my opinion, my flop of the season. David, go with you next. Your flop.
It's hard to argue with your own choice of Lewis Smith. It's not by any means us saying he's a bad player, but like you said, the expectations were high. For him, and I think he would agree that we all kind of expected a bit better. Whether that's down to the system, whatever, you're right. I remember saying in particular the year that we went up through the playoff, I remember saying that I actually thought Ali Crawford had a particularly poor year that year. I didn't think he offered as much. I didn't think he created anything. It wasn't until we went up to the Premiership where you felt like guys like Ali Crawford had a bit more space and his game flourished where it didn't in the Championship. I think that's kind of something that Lewis has fell victim to. His decision making is not quite there, and he doesn't have the time to kind of make those decisions and kind of show that creativity that we know he's got. And I think, like I say, change of system, change of personnel in the dugout. It's just not been a great year for anybody, let's be honest. Even the awards we're giving out are probably a pinch of salt for quite most of them. Flop, I would say Josh Mullen for myself, just because I again jumped on the hype train when that signing was announced. Somebody who's really excelled in the Championship in the past, a really attacking minded player with an end product and a great record, a type of signing we don't make. This was something that we were saying on earlier podcasts, the type of signing we'd love to make. We got what we wanted and it just didn't work out. We didn't play him in the position that he's known for. So again, you can't really place all the blame on him, but I'd be like to say I didn't expect better. So I would go with Josh Mullen.
I think it was a fairly common response on Twitter as well. We'll run through them after Brandon gives his.
I think, see, this one's a difficult one in my opinion, because the term flop could get construed several ways. The way in which I see flop, for instance, Mullen, I don't think whatsoever it's his fault for being for not getting to the standard we thought. When we signed Josh Mullen, we thought Josh Mullen was going to be a forward type player. He's not played there at all season. We thought he was going to reach big levels, but we've not really gave him a chance. With Lewis Smith, I totally agree with what you're saying, which although we all really do like and appreciate, and he's obviously an Accies fan himself, I don't know what it is, if it's confidence, if it's, I don't know if something's perhaps happened and it's sort of dented his confidence, or if he's just not reached the levels which they thought he was going to reach, which is unfortunate. I don't think he's had many, because let's be honest, in the Premiership he was one of our standout players, especially being for so young. So I think you could definitely put him in the flop category. There's other players like Jamie Hamilton, who before this season, I think you saw what teams he was getting touted for. We couldn't talk more highly of him, but unfortunately in the setup he's been asked to play a lot of different positions. It's not really fair to sort of put him in that category, same as Mullen either. And then there's other different players that fall into haven't reached the heights we expected them, but it's not really fair giving them that sort of that label, because we've not really given him a chance. So the one in which I'm going to go with, which I've saw a few people mention, is Luke Matheson. I probably would have went with Lewis Smith, but just to be different, I'm going to go with Matheson, because when Matheson signed, obviously we signed him as everybody was crying out for a right back. It was a right back which we clearly needed. We've signed a player that is on loan for Wolves. He scored at Old Trafford. He was a £1 million player. The hype was well and truly there, and for whatever other reason, it just didn't work at all. I don't know if you can use the setup really as his excuse in this one, because I suppose you kind of could a wee bit, because obviously we're mentioning about Kieran Mcdonald being in the left back role. He's not really getting the opportunity, so it'd be interesting to see how Matheson would have played with the three centre backs. I think that would have definitely been interesting, and that might have helped him out. He is quite young, but I'm going to go with Luke Matheson, because I think there was such an expectation on him that he was going to do so well in the position we signed him for, and he ultimately didn't. So I just think the fact that we've not really gave many other people chances because of the setup we've played and playing them out of positions, that Luke Matheson's my choice.
Luke Matheson's a great shout. It's one that I never really thought of. As you said, coming down £1 million player, we all expected so much. A few names thrown in from people. Fiona's thrown in Spence and Hughes. You've got the likes of Josh Mullen's came up quite a few times. Moyo's been mentioned for flop as well. The likes of Vertanen's been thrown in too. Although one thing I want to mention is Adam Donaghy has mentioned his flop is Kai Kennedy. I'm interested in your opinions on Kai Kennedy. Only signed in January, didn't get a great run of games, played a handful, scored one goal, but ultimately leaves us with an injury and with very little effect on the football team, really. We kind of said when Kai Kennedy joined, it was a strange one. We never saw that signing coming. It was not something we expected. But he just never really kind of got onto his feet and got a good run of games in. And he showed at moments what he could do, how good he was with the ball at his feet, but didn't get a chance to showcase that. So what are your guys' opinions on Kai Kennedy's half season with Accies?
Again, probably speaking for on behalf of everybody, a lot is known for Football Manager. We knew that he was a decent prospect. He had a decent record at Inverness. We also knew what we were getting, where this seemed like a lot kind of, I know it's stupid because he's still dead young, but it seemed like a last chance to prove yourself in the Championship, because he's been, 5 teams now in the space of 2 years. I don't think he spent more than half a season at a club. We felt like he had something to prove, and we expected a bit better from him. There's times where seeing him on the park, he was by far one of the most comfortable players on the ball on that park, both teams. But they just didn't work. I don't know if it's not many people play with out and out wingers anymore, or the type of football he has, or his end product wasn't quite there, or his attitude, or it's easy to kind of jump on the kind of excuses when there's a guy that age at Rangers. You could guess the kind of money he's on, but it just didn't work out. There was always the chance of that happening. We knew what we were getting with his record, but it was disappointing. It didn't work out.
I think when he signed, we're all obviously, because we were crying out for signs. So any sort of signing was seen to be sort of something good. It was a player that everyone knew of, like David's touched on. Sort of, he had been about the Championship, but we knew he had sort of ability. But the signing itself, it just didn't really suit the bill with anything that sort of Taylor was saying at the time. And we obviously knew we had wingers ourselves that were probably deserving of a chance, although in hindsight they've been injured now. But I can understand why Adam said that, because he's a good player, and ultimately he had one sort of good moment in the brief cameos that he did have, and just ultimately just didn't work out, unfortunately.
Yeah, a few more names just before we move on that were thrown in for our flop. Look, Matheson's been thrown in as well by Reese. More Josh Mullins, Regan Mimno has been thrown in as well. So a fair variety. I think it's fair to say that we've not been short of choice for flop this season, given how some people have played. Let's move on to our young player of the year, our young standouts. Again, short for choice, I think, is fair. Brandon, let's start with you this time. Your young player of the year.
Well,
I guess sums it up. Then it's just
there's only I don't know. I feel like a Man U fan and try to get to Andy Ryan, sort of Jesse Lingard-esque 28-year-old. I don't know. I mean, it's between. I think it can only really be between two of them. I think it can only really be between Jamie Hamilton or Marley Redfern. Unfortunately, Redfern hasn't played many games, in my opinion, so it would be hard to give him it because he's not played that many games. Having said that, Jamie Hamilton, he has played the vast majority of the season, but he's got nowhere near the standard which I expected, and I know, and majority of fans should know that he's capable of. He will go into much better things, whether we keep him this season or not. It's a different question, as I really hope we do for next season. But he will go into better things in his career. It's just he's not really been played in his position and played in a setup which suits him. I'm going to get to Marley Redfern. Although he's only played a handful of games, I do think it was within that period where we were pretty ranked rotten, and he was one of the only bright sparks within those games. Although we might not have won all the games, I just for the reason that I don't think Hamilton's got to anywhere near I thought he was going to, whether that's his own fault, the setup or whatnot. And I think Marley Redfern did give us a few good moments. He was a sort of bright spark, and I do think had his injury had not hindered him, that it would continue to sort of be an important player for us, judging by the way in which that setup was getting continuously played. So I'm going to go with Marley Redfern.
Very interesting. David, young player of the year.
So again, I think what Brandon's saying is completely fair. I mean, when I seen the tweets, everybody was Hamilton. I'm not saying that Hamilton hasn't done well, but like you say, he's the only kind of young player that's kind of featured enough to be in the discussion. I just couldn't give it to Jamie Hamilton either. Not that he hadn't done okay, but we expect him to do a lot better. He could have done a lot better. I wanted the headlines to be there for him. The way that people are raving about Tam O'Brien or both, I wanted that to be all about Jamie Hamilton, and It just hadn't happened. For me, again, I think it's a given. We'll try to give different answers to make this a bit more interesting. I would maybe go premature, but I would say Andy Winter for myself. Hasn't, the same way with Brandon's answer with Mallory Riffin, hasn't played in enough of games, but when he kind of come back, obviously you've got the Inverness winner to kind of kick that all off, but he prompted a change in style as well that really, I think, marked the start of our season, if you can really argue our season started at all. Many times we'd get a good result and we'd be tweeting, "Oh, this is where it's going to turn around." It just never really came to fruition. But the best period of our season and the change in style came through Andy Winter coming back into the fray. So I would say, like I say, it's a hollow victory for whoever gets it. It's not been good enough across the board in the young department, because this is where our pride is. Apparently, we're the best youth academy, and they boast about this. You'd think in the championship we would have a much more in-depth discussion when it comes to this topic, but it's not. But hopefully next year will be a bit better on that front. But I would say, for me, Andy Winter, just because of what that kind of represented in that point of the season.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. His name was thrown in quite a few times as well. I'm going to be that guy, and I'm going to say Jamie Hamilton. I agree with everything you guys have said. I just feel that Jamie Hamilton is the only consistent player. He's been in nearly every single starting 11, as Brandon said, in a variety of positions. And I just feel that when I was looking at that list of players, I couldn't give it to Andy Winter. Again, just purely down to the amount of games he's played, and it's the same with Marley Redfin as well. So I think it sounds horrible to say, but by default, I have to give it to Jamie Hamilton.
And I don't want this to be sounding as if we're criticising Jamie Hamilton anyway. I don't think for a second that Jamie Hamilton has been. He's not been bad at all. I think the only reason I think, as you said, he's been very consistent throughout the season. I just think because in our mindset we were expecting so bigger things from him this season, whether that be down to his cell or unfortunately the setup that we keep going on about and playing out of position, etc. That's my mindset of why I've not gave him it. I think he has probably been one of the only fairly consistent players that's got a sort of minimum of 6 each game that we've played all season. It's just my mindset that he was going to hit the headlines and he would have probably had a bigger move by now. It's just, unfortunately, he's not reached that heights. Yeah,
he's also been playing out of position. I mean, he's been playing right back for a lot of the season, and he played right back a handful of times in the Premiership, but really he's kind of, when he was getting the headlines and when he was getting touted for big moves was when he was playing at centre back. And he's been put in at right back because, look, Matheson flopped and we needed a right back option. And as Brandon said, it's not as if he's went there and done terribly. He's done okay. But okay is not what we expect of Jamie Hamilton. We expect a lot better. So, no, we don't want this to be seen as a criticism. We don't want any of this to be seen as a criticism really of any player. Just our opinions of what we expected in the season. We'll move on now to our goal of the season. Now, this prompted a bigger or a wider variety of choice than I thought, to be honest. I thought it was a pretty given what our goal of the season was, but apparently not. David, let's start with you this time. Your goal of the season.
It's got to be the Queen of the South goal, Josh Mullen. If you're talking about, like I say, with my answer at the last question, it was about the bigger picture and what that meant. Best goal by a mile of the season. It was absolute class. It was one of the ones where you don't realise it's happening in front of you, and then it goes in the back end and you think, holy shit, what have I just seen? Especially the way we've been playing this season, and in particular at times in that game. There was a couple, I remember earlier in the season, I think it was when we were sitting together, the 3 years, and it was at home to Kelly. It was the Stuart Taylor's game. We were sitting in the stand and went down. There was like no football being played, and there was one instance near the end of the first half where we put the ball on the deck and put a couple of passes together. And I think Brandon was tearing his hair out because he's saying, "Why are we not doing this? This is what
every game, but it doesn't matter how we play. It's just
this is what we can do when we try to do that." And that Queen of the South goal Like, if we get up, we can clearly play that kind of football. You don't see many other teams doing that. We've had the Hibs game, we've had this game, we've done this. It's not a fluke. And not many other teams, you don't see goals like this going about. Why don't we try to utilise this type of football more often? It was a beautiful goal. It's an easy decision for me. The Kunis South goal was ridiculous.
Yeah, that's what I thought was going to be an overwhelming answer. But as I said, a wider choice. I said Mullen versus Queen in the South as well for many of the same reasons. I won't go over them again, but just a really, really well worked goal. I think nearly every player touched the ball in the process, one touch passing, and it was put on a play. I don't think Josh Mullen expected it to be so easy. He laid off his pass, made a run, and next thing you knew, it was at his feet, and he was tapping into an empty net. So for me, easy choice: Mullen versus Queen of the South.
Moyo at Morton. No, listen, it has to be Mullen. Simple as that. I'm not going to go into it because David's expertly analysed it. So I think we can all agree Mullen definitely deserves that one.
Yeah. As I said, there was a wide variety. Alan picked out Winter against Thistle. I think that was our sixth goal, maybe our fifth goal, where he just runs, our fifth or sixth, it was our fourth goal where he's played through and chips it over the keeper. Really, really nice finish. Ian has said Mullen versus Queens. He agrees with us. Tony's picked out Winter versus Ayr. It's not one that came to my mind straight off the bat. I might need to go back and rewatch it, but he's thrown that in. As is Stephen Donaghy, he's also thrown in Winter versus Ayr. So again, we'll need to go back and look at that. Doesn't come to my head straight away. Yep, another shout for Andy Winter versus Partick Thistle. And a lot of shouts for Mullen versus Queen of the South. So
one that's just popped into my mind that I don't think anybody was mentioned. There was a couple of good goals the very first. I think it's been that far away that none of us can remember, but Raith Rovers away, the 4-4 game, there was a couple of decent goals in there. And there's something that I'll probably touch on as the podcast goes on. But there's a good variety of choice, but I just don't see why you could give it to anybody else bar the Mullen goal. It was just an ultimately complete team goal, a goal that none of us really expected to see, and it was a type of playing which we said after it, we know we've got players that have shown they've got abilities to sort of play nice football on the deck, and it's just frustrating that we don't do it more often.
Yeah, definitely. Let's move on now to our worst moment of the season. For me, it was pretty obvious or pretty easy. I've said Partick Thistle 6, Accies now at home. It was just an absolute battering from minute one. You can see in the video, and it was the video that was featured on The View for the Terrace, so thanks for that, guys. Started pretty confident and then just got increasingly sadder as the video went on, and it was just, like I said, it was a battering from minute one, and I think by the time the third goal went in, half the support had already left and went home, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And then at the end of the game, what made it worse was seeing the Partick Thistle players and the media kind of taking the piss almost, joking about how easy the game was. Zach Rudden, I think it was, in the press, joking about how easy he found the game. It just...
Well, he's getting relegated, so get out.
It stands out to me. It was awful to sit and watch live, and it was the game that Brandon, I think I was speaking to you afterwards, where I just was like, what is the point anymore? I really, really struggled to put that video together, and I struggled to go to the next game afterwards. So for me, it was an easy choice. It was Partick 6, Accies now.
I'll let David go next, because I've got a feeling mine's going to be different.
Well, I've got two, if I can go with two.
I don't think mine's will be the same as yours. Mine's just quite another.
My special mention would actually go for half an hour into the Inverness game last week, because, like I said, that was you're sitting there thinking, we've not learned a fucking thing, have we? Just go, get the game out of the way, put up a fight, show some desire, some professional pride. None of that, and it put such a sour note on a really sour season. But you wanted, when you have a season like that, I think St Mirren a few years ago in the Championship, they just survived with the skin of their teeth. I think it was 8th. They finished that season, but the way that they performed that second half of the season, They totally galvanised the support. They turned things around, and there was confidence going into the next season, which they actually built on and won the league the next season. That's the best that we could hope for as fans at the end of this season, is something to, I said this with the home game at the 8th, something to get fans counting down to the season started. Whereas I think I speak for all of us, we were like, thank fuck that's over. And I was happy that there was nothing else after that. It really was they've not learned anything here. And like I say, at the moment, signings and that will come and go, but I don't have anything to be confident about at this point. So I'm going to need a lot of convincing for next season coming. So that's definitely one that it was a sour note at the end of a sour season, like I said. But the overall worst moment's got to be Auchinleck. I wasn't actually at the game. I was flying out to Lanzarote that day, and it was just as I landed, you know, like when you're just coming in and you just start to get a signal on your phone. And I checked my phone because I was just starting to get bars of signal, and one football flashed up that was the full time. I actually put my phone back on airplane mode because I thought that's got to be a fucking joke. I don't think any were surprised. As soon as the draw was made, I remember doing the graphic and sticking it up. Everyone said they'll beat us. They'll have more about them than us. You just can't be wrong. You can't have them prove you right there. It just gets. We've had so many embarrassing results over the year, and it's the fact that it wasn't a surprise that made it just as bad as it was, because there was no surprise. A junior team, and no disrespect, but it shouldn't be a conversation that they're having. There should be no doubt, no matter what team we put out with changes or no, any player that we pay a full-time wage to should be able to be better than their equivalent in that game, and nobody was, and there was no surprise, and it was just a reality check of where we were and the direction we're going in. So again, that was a terrifying notification on the phone. So that's my two.
Like, there's so many really poor moments that have happened in the season that I'm sure as we go on with this, we'll probably touch on when we're actually sort of summarising how the season went. The two that you've mentioned there, the three that have been mentioned so far are definitely probably like game-wise, and the reasoning behind the game-wise is definitely up there. But worst moment, what I'll call it, is David Templeton getting injured. If you saw what he's done for us over the years, and we knew that he was obviously coming to the end of his sort of career, but we did always have that glimmer of hope that, like he showed when he came on in Rafe, like he single-handedly got us a point for being 4-0 down, and how different the season could have been had he been fit. Moment-wise, that would be my worst moment. Don't get me wrong, there's so many. Auchinleck was horrendous. Thistle after that, when we wanted to just give up doing this completely, that was horrendous. There's been so many moments throughout the season that we've all talked about just why I stopped doing this. You stopped doing the sort of press conferences, and quite rightly so, because just how lacking engagement and lack of interaction the club were given both on and off the park. And then summing the full season up at Inverness there, where I've went up a 8-hour fucking round trip and left the stadium at half time. So there's been so many games, but over the Templeton thing for me could have been a complete season changer had he not get injured. So that's one of the moments, because I just want to be different to what you have chosen, no choose a match.
Well, let's mention in the Inverness game just quickly, Brandon, just from your perspective, because obviously we were up at the game, and what you tweeted out afterwards, it was the first time you'd ever left the game early. And obviously I remember we were standing together in the stand. What was going through your mind at that point? You know, you're not a fan who leaves early, you're a fan who goes to every game home and away, you know?
So you're kind of right. So this is the first season that I've ever left a game early. Before then, there was games that I would go to, and I think the Dundee one always stands out. Hibs away, Rangers away, Celtic away, all these games where I've watched us get absolutely battered. And I've stayed until the final whistle just because that was in my nature to do it. And this season, I think like we touched on at the start of the season, when like every fan, when we did get relegated, we were like, you know what? Maybe it is about time we go down so we can actually get that feeling of actual winning games again. And this season is it's just been even worse than probably the last few seasons, especially the fact that we're allowed back to the games after COVID, and this is what we've had to endure. I don't think anybody really expected it to be this disappointing. So I going up to Inverness, obviously what we're getting told during the week about sort of the youth playing, etc., then to go up there and see the lineup not having any youth in it whatsoever, not having any sort of debutants, but resorting back to that fucking setup that we've been so frustrated with majority of this season. It clearly hasn't worked, and having to then bring on a centre back after half an hour when you're already 4-0 down. It was just, I was like, you know what, I'd rather go and sit in the bus and get pished than fucking endure any more of this. So it was, I think that game summed up the full season for me, and hopefully it can just get forgot about now. And obviously with the sort of the deal they've brought out for the under-18s, hopefully that's something that can kick on a bigger support for next season, because by God they'll need it.
Well, that just again quickly before we move on, that season ticket offer we've put up on Twitter and we'll kind of continue to broadcast. That's a fantastic deal. All under-18s, if anybody doesn't know, all under-18s get a free season ticket, whether accompanied by an adult or not, for next season, and that's fantastic. So give them to your kids, your grandkids, whoever, get them down to the
We'll make sure to market this as well as possible, because I think they'll need a hand in marketing, put it that way. So it's another thing that we spoke about timelessly, that it's something that the club's done that is actually really good, but the manner in which they're doing it just isn't how it should be, and it won't get took up on to the level that it should. And yeah, it's up to us to sort of try and help that get out there and hopefully get as many people in the sort of local community to take it up, because let's be honest, like, we don't know the circumstances. A lot of people within the sort of town of Hamilton, getting to go to a game, it could just be a completely different experience to them, something that they might not be as fortunate to sort of get the opportunity to do stuff like that. So it's about allowing these people to know, and hopefully we can get out there and get as many people to take it, and hopefully it can bring in a new sort of generation and bring in some new fans that the club definitely needs.
And they can be part of the hashtag Aki's identity. That's what you want, isn't it, for the new generation? Let's talk now, guys, about our best moment of the season, something you can look back on with some happiness. Brandon, let's start with you this time. Your best moment of the season.
Peterborough's big arse out at Inverness away in the park. No, if I'm actually being honest, I think that Inverness game is probably up there, the 2-1. Obviously, we've travelled all the way up there. We're 1-0 down. We thought, oh, this is it again. And we turned it around and won the game 2-1. Obviously, 2 good goals. And it was just obviously a long trip, extremely intoxicated. And just the celebrations after it was really, really good. And then everything after it as well was sort of like the sort of social media aspect and stuff like that. It was just, there was nobody you could see being negative at all about that time. So I'd probably go with 2-1 Inverness, and just everything about that sort of result and the sort of celebrations and whatnot. Don't get me wrong, there have been a few games that have been sort of unexpected and have been good, which I'm sure you'll touch on. But yeah, I'm going to go with Inverness 2-1.
Frustratingly, I'm going to say the same. I said Winter's winner against Inverness, just for a lot of the same reasons. The celebrations, we went one each. The celebrations were great. Some of the best I've been a part of are Accies. Everybody bombarding the stairs to get down to the front, the players celebrating. Obviously, we're at the goal end. And then when Winter comes on, it's his first or second game back from a long injury. It's his first goal. It's a great header, and he runs immediately into the fans. I remember going down, it's in the video, saw Niall on the ground, and I remember stepping over him and thinking to myself, I should probably help him up. But I remember thinking, well, no, I wouldn't be part of the celebration. Then I turned around, he was getting helped up. But honestly, that just, like Brandon said, the celebrations for the winner, what happened afterwards, everyone leaving the ground positive. And as Brandon said, the kind of interactions on social media afterwards were brilliant. So I would have to say Andy Winter's winner against Inverness. David, your best moment of the season?
I think we could probably all agree this is probably the hardest one to think of. There wasn't a lot to choose for at all, which speaks volumes. For me, it was the Partick Thistle game, the 4-0. Like I said earlier, there's far too many games and moments this season where, like Brandon touched on, we do this because we're so passionate about Hamilton Accies. Even we were hard to motivate at times to do this and actually go to the game and be involved or even have an interest. That was a game where I feared the worst. I thought there's absolutely no chance, and they pulled it out of the bag. I don't think anybody would lie and say that they had that on their mind that was what the result was going to be. I'd been saying all season I'd love to see us kill a game off early, just play good football, enjoy the game, be all positive online after it. And like you say, that didn't happen too many times this season, but it was an absolute treat when it did, and it shows you what a season in the Championship really should be for Hamilton and the fans, and we do deserve that and deserve a lot better. So that was a brilliant day, because I think I remember texting you, Ben, and saying it was totally unexpected, and it makes doing the tweets, doing the videos, everyone just fills you with enthusiasm. And it really had been difficult at times this season with the way it's been going, and the way, like Brandon said, the way that they've went about things as well, where you feel like you're carrying the brunt of it and you're the only one that's putting the effort in, and that really cares about ourselves as fans and everything. So that was a really good moment for me. Fortunately, there wasn't as many of them as I'd like, but no, that was a good day.
I loved that Partick Thistle 4-0 game. I absolutely loved it. My friend Callum is a very big Partick Thistle fan, and he was Snapchatting me before the game started. And as the game went on, the Snapchat started to come through less and less and less. And then by full time, I hadn't heard from him. So that was good as well. But listen, as David said, there's not a huge amount of good moments. But I suppose I think somebody said it on Twitter, that's kind of part of being an Accies fan. You never expect anything good to happen. So when it does, like the part you savour it.
And that's the sort of type of moment. Sorry for interrupting.
No,
you carry on.
No, listen, I had nothing else to say. You were absolutely right to interrupt.
Aye, so like you said, it's these type of moments that we don't get them very much. But then when they do come around, it's a completely different feeling. It does make it completely worthwhile to those 90% other ones that make you fucking extremely doom and gloom. But there's not been as many as what we'd hoped for this season. We just need to hope that we get much more next season, because I think we deserve it, if we're being honest. And I think we all deserve it. Morton was one that sort of came into my mind, because I wouldn't say it was one of my best moments, but it was one of my most relieved moments, because I don't think I could have endured another relegation. And I don't think I could have. I don't know what that had done for both myself and many other supporters, and what it would have done for the club as a whole would we have got relegated. So actually, winning that game at Morton sort of just put my mind to ease massively, because I was sort of still on the edge whether we would perhaps go down again or not. But what was other sort of answers people gave? Because there's not really other ones I can think of off the top of my head, bar those that we've mentioned.
Yeah, so best and worst moment we didn't put out to Twitter, so we have no answers from people.
Okay.
But the Morton thing, again, one of the great things about playing at Morton is the way the away fans are seated is obviously right next to the Morton board and sponsors. So when they got their 97th minute winner or whatever it was, they turned around and were giving a stick, and then when we won away at Morton, it was great to turn around and see those faces back again, a lot less happy. But no, yes, like I said, not a huge amount of moments, but the ones that do come up.
Maybe even what about one of the very first moments of the season when me and you get into a bit of trouble?
Yeah, so for the first game of the season, Brandon and I are in press for Wraith Rovers, a 4-4 draw, and obviously we're sitting 4-0 down. As the goals are in, we're starting to celebrate and get louder and louder, and then as the game draws to a close and the final whistle goes, I stand up to cheer, Brandon grabs me and drags me down. He's like, no, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Then we get pulled up after press, just saying to calm it down. Remember what?
I think I done that to you because I realised after we scored that fourth goal, we both went absolutely tonto and we were just getting absolute daggers of the people round about us. Obviously, the players were beside us and they were having the same reaction, but I don't think the rest of the sort of journalists, etc., were too happy with us. But yeah, that's part and parcel of being a fan. If you can't know exactly expect a supporter or even a normal football fan to celebrate a team coming back through 4-0 down. So, no, that was quite a funny moment. Aye.
And I would also throw in, just before we move on, David McFarlane's impression of Brian Rice.
Brian Rice. I think, if we can relive that moment, that'd be great.
I was going to say, just for good measure, I'm going to play the clip a few times. Let's play the clip one more time.
I tell you what, so I've seen the same referee at Dumbarton and no give a penalty. They give a penalty here the day for less. We're getting nothing. We're getting absolutely nothing. I know some of these lads, I'm angry. And I'm fed up boring Crawford, Allen, and getting pushed to the side because we're only fucking Hamilton.
Just for good measure, because it's so funny. Right, let's get into the big one then, our player of the year. I'm interested because, again, there was a wider variety of choice, and I thought there would be. David, let's start with you this time, your player of the year.
See, I wish you'd come to me last, because I'm going for one that is definitely, based on what I've seen on Twitter, it's definitely going to be a different answer. But me, I would say Andy Ryan. Granted, in the later stages of the campaign, he's not really featured much with his injuries and things like that. But it was, I think, when he signed, majority of fans were underwhelmed because we knew him, obviously, for his time previous at Hamilton. He's came through the ranks, and I think he would qualify as someone that didn't really fulfil his potential at Hamilton first time round. He'd done reasonable at Stirling Albion in the third division the year before, so I think expectations were lowered when Andy Ryan came in, especially what later preceded that nobody else would be coming in after him and he was going to be a forward option. But I think I speak for everybody to say how kind of pleasantly surprised we were. His work ethic, seeing him doing the press interviews, obviously seeing him, there was, when the results were going bad, we were seeing him every week because they were just sending him up because he was obviously captain at the time for the majority of those games, and it was good to see somebody that it really hit him hard, and he appreciated where we were coming for his fans. He wasn't giving you the kind of standard answers. He was showing some emotion, and you see that on the park as well. I think he's led by example. You've seen his frustrations with his teammates at times. He's stepped up as captain. I think he's done pretty well as a captain as well. But I think it might speak volumes of how kind of lacking we are in the forward areas. But anytime, especially if he's coming off the bench, and like I think it was it's Hearts B or Aberdeen B in the Challenge Cup, we were just pissing about for so long. He comes on, he comes off on the inside and curls one round. He's done that a couple. I think he scored that exact same goal 3 times this season. He's the first player that looked any hint of dangerous for ourselves. And I think he was fairly consistent as well. Decent goal return. Like I say, injuries kind of slowed that down a lot near the end. But it's been an underwhelming season. But he's someone that I was always happy to see it included or come onto the park. And I think he really got how hard we were finding that season as fans as well. So I would like I said, not many to choose from, and there are others that I would choose. Like I said, that's why I kind of wanted to go last, because there are others that will of course be mentioned, but just to kind of show a bit of variety, I think Andy Ryan definitely deserves a mention.
I very, very nearly put Andy Ryan as well, just for the same reasons you said. I think he epitomised what it felt to be an Accies fan whenever we spoke to him. I just say whenever we did press with him, it was very, very honest. He didn't give the standard, frustrating game. He showed genuine anger and frustration. And it's one of the rare times where we've done press, and I felt like the player genuinely understood what we were feeling after games. As David said, whenever we lost the game, you knew we were guaranteed to get Andy Ryan or Brian Easton. That's the two players who were getting up, because they get it, to quote Brandon, they get it. And so I very, very nearly put Andy Ryan. Also top goal scorer of the season, I think 11 goals in the championship. So, not a terrible goal return. And I very, very nearly put myself. I've ended up going with Daniel O'Reilly. I think that he only signed in January, so I can understand that argument there, but I just think he's shown so much composure on the ball. He's really helped sort out our defence. He is an absolute animal in the air, and as I keep saying to Rudy when I sit next to him at the games, he's my centre back. I really like Daniel O'Reilly. He's integrated great with the fans as well. He interacts with them on Twitter and on Instagram and all that, which we don't see from Accies players. But in terms of on the park, the relationship he's built up with Popescu and Brian Easton when they play together, he just brings a kind of coolness and a calmness to the defence that we never had when he wasn't there. And I think he will end up being a very shrewd piece of business by Accies, and he's contracted for next year, and hopefully he continues to build on this and he signed another contract and he stays here, because Daniel O'Reilly really sorted out our defence, I think, that second half of the season. So I have to go with Daniel O'Reilly.
There's only been a few times in recent years as Hamilton fans where we make a signing, you see them on their debut and you think they're fucking quality. That's it. First team every week. For the ones that come to mind are like Michael McGovern. When he signed for Falkirk, you knew what you were getting with him. First time I seen Dougie Emery play for Hamilton. First time we were in the SPL. Again, hit the ground running and kept that up. And I definitely think Daniel O'Reilly is one of them as well. I think he's came in, showed what he can do, set his standard and kept it up. Maybe a couple of wee hiccups in the last couple of weeks. But I think everything you say is spot on. I think he'll be a huge player, and there'll definitely be eyes on him next season if he keeps that up. So no, I agree with that as well.
Listen, I completely understand both of your decisions. Like you have said, I don't think it's one that we're exactly graced with lots of different options. I think you're pushing it if you maybe mention 3 players that sort of could be put in that category. The levels of inconsistency throughout the season has just been massive, in my opinion. There's not been, apart from a handful of players, there's not been, not even a handful, I'd say 1 or 2 players that have been like Ryan. My argument why I'm not going for Ryan would be that it's also, once again, not his own fault, but when he's played in that setup and he's been the lone striker, he's not been really that effective. His sort of goal return when he was played in that role wasn't the best. Don't get me wrong, always like to see him on the team sheet. I just don't think he was utilised to the level in which he could have, and who knows how better he could have actually been had he been utilised like he had been for some of the games where he was at his best for the most part of the season, which we hope he will be next season. O'Reilly, I just couldn't give it to him because the argument, like you said, he came in January. He's been a very good bit of business, and I do think that if he continues in the manner in which he is, he'll be someone that probably will go into maybe a better team. Hopefully not anytime soon, but it's a brilliant piece of business. The one I'm going for is Popescu. I was going to play ABBA, but I don't know if I'm at the right part.
What I'll do is I'll put Abbott in very quietly as you speak underneath.
Okay. So I'm going with Popescu just for the fact that I think we're no graced with many big choices we could make here, but I don't think there's been a single game bar the past 2 weeks where he hasn't been a minimum of 7 in every game. There's been a lot of games that we have been really, really poor in. I just think he's been the one player that's been there from the start of the season and has been sort of that level of consistency. Don't get me wrong, there's other players that have stood out in many games in comparison to him. I just think he's been the most consistent. He's never really had a poor game bar the past couple of weeks. And as a player that when he came in, I think he was made during the week, and it was a signing nobody was really expecting. And there was sort of mixed reviews from Hearts fans were saying he was rotten. St Mirren fans were full of praise for him for the season before. And I just think without him and the sort of partnerships he's made and some of the things he's done, he's obviously been captain throughout the season as well. He built up a really good relationship with the fans. I don't think there's many fans could say a really bad word about him, bar the fact that he's maybe not been himself recently and he maybe hasn't reached the heights he could when Easton has been there. So my decision is going to go with Popescu, but I do think that the 3 players that we have mentioned are probably the only players that deserve to be in that category.
Yeah, well, just speaking on that, I'm looking through it now. I don't see any other player mentioned other than the 3 that we have. So lots of shouts for Popescu. He's very popular. A few shouts for Andy Ryan as well. And Daniel Norelli's been thrown in there. There is one shout I've literally just seen there, Player of the Year. I do not know that name. Sorry, Longosha. They've said Steve Lawson is their Player of the Year. I suppose Steve Lawson's, we've kind of touched on Steve Lawson earlier on. He has brought something to the midfield, obviously signing January as well. But just before we move on, Stephen Donaghy's listed his Player of the Year. He said the fans, maybe a bit taking the piss a little bit out of the tweet, but the fans have been great this season. Very, very vocal, especially at the away games. And I don't think that Accies fans get the thanks from the club that they deserve, in my opinion, given the support that we give them every week, given the stuff we have to put up with on a weekly basis. And I think the fans deserve a shout out at this point just for how good they've been and how vocal they've been.
I think there's been many parts, like you just need to look at that after Auchinleck, the home game against Kilmarnock in that cup, there was genuinely no more than about 100 fans. Accies fans are very vocal, whether it be with their feet or with their voice. When we're getting behind the team and when we've got reason to get behind the team, they will always do that regardless. But when we're getting treated with contempt and we're not getting anything back, why do they deserve to be getting that support? We just need to hope with this deal that they've brought out for next season and hope that their signings are made that help get people back on board, because I think all it takes for this season, there's a lot of fans that have obviously disappeared and have went away, and there's a lot of fans that are on the sort of, they've not made a decision. I think a lot of fans are waiting until they see a sort of transfer window in which we have before deciding what they do next season. So unless they sort of back Taylor and they give the fans a sort of transfer window that is remotely acceptable for where we've been the past few years, then I do see this sort of continuing to dwindle regardless of the under 18 deal or not. But no, the fans have been great for the times that they have got behind the team, and at some of the away games, and we know that they're capable of it, and we just ask for something back in return, which we hope happens this summer.
Well, let's end with rating our manager and rating our season as a whole. So let's start with Stuart Taylor then. This one, looking at the replies, I do not see an answer above a 5 for Stuart Taylor's manager rating. But Brandon, let's start with you. If you were to rate Stuart Taylor's season out of 10, how would you rate it and why?
I think a 5 is reasonable in my opinion. I think, listen, he's came in, he's inherited a squad for a manager that many people could argue was worse than he is. Many would argue the squad he's inherited weren't good enough. It's not his own squad. You could argue the players that he's brought in have improved that. You could argue that the results since he's came in have improved. I just don't think things have improved to the level that easily could have been possible. He's been here a lot. People say, oh, things have improved since he came in. People forget how early he did actually come in. He's been here the vast majority of the season. Yes, he's kept us up, but he's had a very long time to do that. We could easily be far further than what we are. Far too many draws, persisted with a setup which for me deserves to be a minus score, because it's clear as day that it's not worked, and we've went on about it constantly. When they did change it up, results were only positive. I don't think we got beat a single game in which we changed it up. We might have got beat one, but when we've changed our setup to a different standard, we showed what we're capable of, but yet he persisted with it. It's been a few times that he's contradicted himself with some of the things that he said. He's obviously mentioned sort of, he wouldn't sign players unless they bettered the squad. Could be argued that one or two of the players that he's done haven't bettered the squad. And ultimately, he was in charge of some of the most humiliating and worst results that we've sort of, our worst moments that we've been part of. Sort of Auchinleck, one of the worst results.
I think statistically it is.
Statistically, worst result in our history. Obviously, after that was a moment that fans went down to voice a displeasure. He's obviously clarified that a bit more why he didn't come out, but getting beat off Thistle 6-0 at home live in national TV, it's embarrassing. And then Inverness as well as other results throughout the season that just weren't good enough, and we could be far better than what we were should he changed it up and maybe not been as stubborn or whatever you want to call it that we've been said. The one thing I will give him plaudits for was coming to the vaults and sort of standing up to his sort of critics and giving the opportunity for people to discuss with him and hear it from his side of things, which he did. And listen, he took it on his chin. But then the thing that pissed me off the most about that was the fact that he said that he knew the setup doesn't work, and then a week later he goes back to it. So I don't think you can give him any higher than a 5, if I'm being honest with you. I think he'd be the first one to say that it's not been good enough. But you do need to give him another window probably now we're in this situation. You need to give him another window, see what players he brings in, and then if we're in the same situation at the start of next season where it continues not to be good enough, we've no planned, we've no prepared, like we've been told we're going to, and all the sort of things that he's been saying he's going to go through with and doesn't go through with without good reason, then very serious questions need to be asked. But hopefully that's not the case.
Yeah, I think I share a lot of the same thoughts. I've went for a 5 as well. As I say, for a lot of the same reasons. I'll give him plaudits for the players he's brought in. I think, obviously, the two we've mentioned already, Daniel O'Reilly and Steve Lawson, they have improved our team, both in midfield and defence, obviously. As Brandon said, it's not been good enough this season, and I think he knows that. I do think there have been signs at points of something he is trying to do. I think there have been signs of a way he wants to play and a team he wants to build. But as you've said, he inherited a mess of a squad, low quality, unbalanced. No real experience, but no real kind of talented youngsters coming through either. And he's had to try and work that. And as he said in my interview with him, he also had to change a lot of the backroom staff as well. A lot of the staff in the background, he's brought in his own assistant manager. So not been good enough, but I think there are signs of something that he's trying to do at least. And as Brandon said, give him the window, give him the summer, in my opinion. If it's still crap next season, he's not brought in players that improve the team. He's not shown improvement in areas. Then we need to start asking questions, or need to start looking at alternatives, and see where we take it from there. But at the moment, I think 5 out of 10 for me is probably fair. David, what about you? If you were to rate Stuart Taylor's season out of 10?
I probably wouldn't go with a number. I'm not really that interested about that kind of rating thing at the moment. I mean, the big thing for me is at this moment, I'm happy for him to continue and go forward and be the man in charge. I feel like you said, he has shown some signs that he has his ambitions and he has a plan in place to take us forward. The big thing for me is he's definitely made mistakes. Like Brandon said, some of the worst results and some of the worst performances have came under him. Majority of this season has been under him. I think it was the end of August. So let's not kind of give him the excuse that he's new in. But I feel like there has been times where he's learned these lessons, and that's a huge thing. It felt like when we were under Rice in the old regime, where we were just stubborn and we were never going to change things, and we were just going nowhere. We don't act like other clubs. I mean, you look at teams like Falkirk, they're in the state that they're in, but they'll always make moves to try rectify it. They brought in an experienced guy with John McGlynn. We were never going to get a tried and tested manager like that. There's always going to be someone learning the trade, and you've got to give Stuart Taylor time. People have had such a short tether for him already, and people have already made their minds up on him. But I think it speaks volumes. We'll never understand how, like, to the extent of what a mess he inherited. We've all heard the rumours, we've all heard this and that. I think there's little to no mentality in that club as a whole, not just playing staff. I mean, we talk about John Rankin like he's a saviour, you know what I mean? He's been brilliant since he's came in, but it's all just because his attitude sticks out. I think just the attitude in the club and the mentality was just wrong. And it's like you say, I put forward Andy Ryan for Player of the Year, probably mostly because of his mentality. So I think the club really was in a rotten state, and I think it will take time. Don't get me wrong, I understand if the results don't start well at the start of the next season and we don't get the signings that we want in, but where do we go for there? Who would be the next guy to bring in? It would be another untried guy. I think this is going to take a lot of time. I think we really are in a horrible state, and there are some big hurdles to overcome. I think last season, I said to you, Ben, I think that was one of the best transfer windows we'd ever had. Now, granted, a lot of the players didn't perform, but we made signings we never made, and we all said we were surprised with the moves we were making. We've shown we're capable of doing that. I feel that we're better equipped to do that going forward now, because I do feel and I do trust that Stan actually has a plan and he knows what he wants and he knows what he's doing and how to go about that. So I think we can't get carried away, and I think it will take time, but I do believe he has a plan in place. Whereas the start of last season, I think we all believed we were in a much better state than what we were in the club, and I think it was arrogance more than anything. So I wouldn't go and give him a rating, but I've seen enough to trust, and I think he is the man to go forward at this point. And I'm, like I say, I'm a lot more cautious going into this next season than I was, like I say, naive last summer. So I think it's a monumental summer coming up. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, let's look at a few ratings that fans have gave. So Aki's Life is gave 5 out of 10. He said inherited an awful squad, made a good couple of signings, had a good couple of runs. Adam Donaghy says 3 out of 10. JP says 5. We've got 6 from Fiona. Let's drop down here, see what else people are saying. Steve McEwen's gave him a 4, Noah 4. So we're all kind of in and around that 4, 5 and 6 kind of middle of the road. I suppose it just depends which way, positive or negative, you lean. You've got Ian HFC, who we'll talk about in a second. He's gave him a 2, as is Stephen Donaghy, who's gave him a 2. So wide variety of opinion, and I think David touched on it there, where people have already made their mind up on Stuart Taylor, and that's fair enough. It's the right to do so. And there are others who feel that he deserves a little bit more time. So That's certainly
I
interesting.
think this that's the summer, as David says, it's huge. It's certainly, I think one thing that we fell into the trap of lots of times, both by former managers and people within the club, is sort of believing in things they say and taking it for gospel, and having an expectancy of something to take place and it not to happen. Taylor has came out and sort of seems to be very understanding of what needs to happen and how he needs to do it and how he needs support for the fans, and that he knows we need to be well prepared. He's came out and done that interview with you, Ben, which is with us, sorry, that's something that you don't really see a manager do. He came up to the pub, etc. So there's something about him that obviously kind of gets it, as I say, and he's obviously not a bad guy. It's just whether or not his man management has been good enough, which I don't think we can say it has been as of yet. He says he wants to change it up next season. He's got a sort of plan in place. We need to wait and see if that takes place. And he knows his sale. You could tell with the sort of manner of interview that a lot of changes needed, and he came across as if he sort of understands that he knows where it needs to take place. So that's why the summer's so big for him. If he doesn't get the ground running, if he doesn't be prepared for the next season, if he doesn't bring in a good amount of players, then he's not going to get the vast majority of Aki's fans on his back, on his side, because ultimately all the fans are looking for this summer as players coming in to show that they're actually serious. And if they do that, then he'll have the fans behind them for the minute the season starts. If we fail to prepare and we don't bring in signings, whereas we see other teams bringing in players, like we've already done with Thistle, then he's already off to a losing battle next season. So, as David says, it's a monumental summer, and hopefully it goes well for him, and that'll be able to have a judgment going forward.
Well, before we wrap up, we have to say a congratulations, and we say this through gritted teeth, I think, Brandon. Congratulations to Ian, HFC, who has won our predictions table. He's pipped us to the post. And I
did predict 4-0 against Inverness, so I did get four of Inverness's goals right, so I thought I should have got an additional point, but aye, well done, Ian.
He's so raging. What's that Charlie Mulgrew kit for? He's raging, isn't he? So yeah, congratulations, Ian. We'll drop you a DM on Twitter just to discuss your prize. Then we'll announce it on Twitter once we get it sorted. But thank you, Ian, for taking part. Thank you for everyone taking part in our predictions league this season. It's been a lot of fun. I'm sure we'll continue on to next season, maybe try and mix up a little bit. But that does bring us to the end of our season review. Thank you again for watching this video. It is a long one, so thank you for sticking by it. Thank you for participating, getting your answers in on Twitter. And as I said on Twitter, I think last week, thank you for watching the channel this season. It's been a hard road this season. It's fair to say we've talked a lot about the moments this season, but your support's invaluable. And as I said, it's been very difficult to continue this at points, but ultimately, I think I speak for everybody here when I say we're proud of what we've done this year and the stuff we've created. So long may that continue. But thank you again for watching. We really appreciate it. We'll be back soon with our transfer videos. I know David's desperate to do it. He's got his notepad ready. We are transfer videos. And as Brandon mentioned before on Twitter Spaces, we'll mix it up with some kind of new content throughout the summer as well. So once again, thank you for watching. We'll see you again soon.